come into the question of emotional communities. And this is what Barbara Rosenwein was talking about. I mean, she didn't apply it to the Quran, of course, like she's talking about entirely different texts. But when Barbara Rosenwein talks about emotional communities and how communities are formed around certain emotive practices, that's what we can see happening in the Quran. What we can see is that loving others is a part of one's communal identity as a Muslim. Okay, so, oh gosh, this would be in probably this is in Al Imran, but I didn't put the verse number. Sorry. Oh, you who believe, do not take as intimates, that's batana, those other than yourselves. They will spare nothing to ruin you. They're eager to see you in distress. Hatred has already shown, I think that's Baghda, has already shown itself from their mouths, min afwahihim, and what their breasts hide is yet worse. We have certainly made the signs clear for you. You are the ones who love them, yuhibbunahum, tuhibbunahum, while they do not love you. And you believe in the whole book. When they meet you, they say we believe, but when they're alone, they bite their fingertips in rage at you, right? So, ghayth. So you can see that the believers actually love too much almost. They love the people who don't even believe, right? And those people are hypocrites who say that they're believing, but they're not. Okay. And here's another aspect of communal identity. But should a grace from God come to you, he will say, as if there were no affection between you and him, I wish I were with them, I would have achieved great success. So this is in the context of fighting, right? So if the troops go out fighting and somebody stays behind, the hypocrite stays behind, he says, if the troops come back with some booty, he says, oh, I wish I were with them so that I would have gotten that booty, basically, right? It's nothing to do with the affection, whereas the troops are going out and they actually feel mawadda for one another, right? There's an affection among the Muslim community. He created mates from among yourselves and ja'ala bainakum mawadda wa rahmatan, right? And yeah, live with your wives decently, and should you dislike them, maybe you dislike something which God has put in much good, right? So there's an idea of also duty to the family, right? So now this I would say that's all on love, which actually I'll summarize in a little while. So I mean, what we've seen there is that love is crucial for communal identity as well as for one's relationship with God. And now I'd like to put into that the notion of the Qur'anic heart, right? And as you all know, the Qur'anic heart has a much wider valence than the head. In English, right, head is used when you say I'm thinking, you say I'm using my head or I'm using my brain. But in late antiquity, there was this notion of all thinking and all feeling occurring in the heart being the locus of all thinking and feeling. So that's why qalb, like the heart, has a wider valence than the head. So when you come across head in the Quran, it's just about ritual practices mostly. So we know like, let's see if I can, yeah. So there's one sense of the Quranic heart, which is feeling and emotion. And you could see that in 3:1-6, Al Imran 1-6. Let's see. Have I got that right? No. Oh, wait, that's one. Sorry. Okay, here we go. 1-5, 1-6. Yes. وَمَا جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بُشْرَى لَكُمْ, right? لِتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُكُمْ, right? So the idea of تَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُكُمْ, that your hearts may be at rest, or that they may feel a sense of ease, right? Or calm. That's where emotion and feeling is happening in the heart. Okay, that's the point. And again, these kinds of phrasings are used in Surah At-Tawbah and in Surah Al-Anfal as well. Okay. So, and there's that important notion that God is between a man and his heart as well in Al-Anfal. Okay. There's another aspect of heart, which is that there's a relationship to the community of believers. Okay. So when in 3103, in Ali Imran 103, so you remember God's blessing upon you when you were enemies, and he brought your hearts together. So let's see if I can find that. Right, 103. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, alaykum. إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم, right? قلوبكم. So he brought your hearts together so that by his blessing you became brothers, right? So there's this idea that the hearts are what are brought together in order to form a community. And then it says, so that he might know the hypocrites when it is said of them, come now, fight in the way of God. They said, if only we knew how to fight, we would follow you. That day they were nearer to unbelief than belief, saying with their mouths that which was never in their hearts, right? So the hypocrites are the people who say things that they do not feel, but the believers are the ones who can feel the right things among. Okay, there's another sense of heart. So we've talked about two senses of the heart. One is that it's what we would call a locus of emotion, what we would think of as emotion, like anger or calm. The second one would be that there's a way in which the heart equals the mind or the spirit and sense in which the community is brought together. But of course, we have as well perception and the senses. You know this, it's the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, right? It's the same to them where whether you've warned them or if you've not warned them, they will not believe. God has set a seal on their hearts and on their hearing, right? And on their eyes as a covering. Yeah, and you know that. And in their hearts is a sickness, and God has increased their sickness, and there awaits for them a painful chastisement. So that's the sense in which, again, unbelievers have the incorrect feeling, but also the incorrect thoughts. Their hearts have marad, right? So, and then finally, of course, we know that hearts are a locus of understanding. So they have hearts which they do not understand, la yafqahuna biha, and eyes with which they do not see. And there's 1746. I just read one last night. There's another one in Hajj, I think, that's like this, where the heart is ya'kaluna biha, and with the heart, and so you understand, right? And yes, exactly, 2246 here. So if we go to we know that they should have hearts with which to understand or ears with which to hear. So, and you know that verse very well, but I'm just going through them. I mean, you can find it in your musafs as well. Yeah, okay. But so what I'm saying here, the point that I'm making is what we might call emotion is fundamental to correct understanding and rationality and moral sensibility. But arenas that we might separate, such as feeling, thinking, perceiving, and sensing, are united in the heart. There's not a clear sense that these things are actually distinct in the Quran. So if we talk about rationality and love, we would say that loving correctly is an aspect of correct perception of God and the community. It's a virtue and it's a moral discipline. You must love correctly in order to be a good believer. You must love other believers and you must love God. What we would consider the mind is not considered separately from the emotions or even the senses. These are various aspects of perception which must be disciplined and are moderated through the heart. This disciplining is probably the process of making oneself rational. So there's a process by which one understands correctly, and it's all about disciplining the self, the nafs. Love correctly trained is intrinsic to rationality. So the idea of aql, of rationality, it has a moral and affective dimension. And love of God is an inherent quality of belief, as I said before. All believers necessarily love God, but love is not an inherent quality in all marriages, as we know. So in that case, duty prevails over feeling. Discipline, love, virtue, and mind are all integral to communal and group formation. That is, the believers have this discipline. Okay, Now, to go a little bit post-Quranic, I'll give you Ibn al-Muqaffa in his Kitab Adab al-Saghir, and you see that he says these things. So what he says is the traits that revive reason, aql, and by which it, reason, aql, becomes complete and firm are 7 only. And one of them is demanding of oneself love of God, of course. And then there's repeated requests, supplication, firmness in choices, habituation to virtue, i'tiyad al-khair, good conduct, husn al-ra'i, becoming committed to choices and opinions, ta'ahud lima ikhtayra wa taquda, and putting that into practice in word and deed. As for love, mahabba, it causes a man to attain a distinguished station in every matter in this world and the next, when he demands of himself only love of God, of course. And nothing can be more wholesome and sweeter to him than that. So here we see that even after the Quran, there's this idea that the mental, rational person is the one who loves correctly. So the conclusion, what are the Quranic emotions and why should we study them? Emotion may not be what we think when we're speaking in English as kind of a feeling that's disassociated from any rational sense. It's not just feeling, but it's thinking and perception. And feeling and thinking correctly is integral to belief. The study of emotion, therefore, could shed new light on Quranic and Islamic piety, law, and theology. When we're talking about, when we have all these assertions that Islam moved to a militant piety and a piety of jihad, actually it's in those very same surahs that we have all of this about love. And so actually these are not, the Quranic discourse on love is often not taken into account in Western academic studies of Quranic theology. So that is my PowerPoint, and I welcome any questions, and thank you again so much for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you all. Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts? Or maybe there's a response? Sorry, I think that I thought that maybe there would be a response by Sahiron. You can raise your hands if you have any questions. Can everybody hear me still? Any thoughts? Is there a it sounds like maybe we're having some technical difficulties. Is that what's happening?
Okay. We have some thoughts from Professor Sahiran, Dr. Karen Bauer. Please, Professor Sahiran.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Karen. Karen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Shall we
good.
pin you so that we can see you?
Okay.
There we go.
Yeah, thank you very much for your very nice presentation. Yeah, I have learned much from your talk. Yeah, and I have short comment to or response to your presentation. Yeah, first of all, you emphasize that it is very important to search for Quranic worldview on emotions in order that Muslims might become good or better people regarding the relation to God and other people. This is very, I mean, very nice. Yeah, I mean, this your presentation is very important for us too, of course, not only for research, but for building our personality, of course. Yeah. In this case, you collect Quranic verses on love, hub, mahabbah, and heart, or call, for the purpose of building a relatively comprehensive concept of on emotions. Then you try to make certain detailed categories of love, namely love's inherence to belief, love changing from worldly desires to God, God's love for good deeds, and the last one is the importance of love for human solidarity or growth. Yeah. Moreover, you also tell us that Quranic worldview on heart can be divided into feeling, relation to community, locus of understanding, and so on and so forth. We have already mentioned. And I see that what you are doing right now can be called in our ulumul Quran a thematic interpretation, at-tafsir al-mawdu'i, with regard to the emotion or the concept of emotion in the Quran. And yeah, second, your thematic interpretation of the Quran in this case, I see, yeah, here, is inspired by certain theories on emotion in the scientific fields, yeah, in history, in science, and so on. So you have already mentioned. It means that the idea of discussing the Quranic worldview on emotion came up after you are aware of the theories on emotions. However, you do not impose these theories on the interpretation of the Quran, on this subject. Rather, you try to let the Quran speak about it. So in this case, then you follow what Hans-Georg Gadamer suggests in his Wahrheit und Methode, that the interpreter should let the text under interpretation speak about something. So this is very important. I mean, this methodological strategy is done by you in order to get the textual objectivity. This is very very nice. But I mean, I would like to have the feedback also. I mean, your comments on my my response, of course. And the last one, I see that the Quranic intra-textuality. What I mean by intra-textuality is here is a method in which someone tries to compare between verses that talk about a certain subject matter and then analyze them carefully. And the last one is, make a conclusion on the subject under discussion. So It is usually used by someone, yeah, for the purpose of searching for historical meaning of certain word. In this case, you try to grasp the historical meaning of the word hub, mahabbah, and heart or qalb, qulub. So in this case, I mean, in this case, I think, yeah, you should pay attention to textual context of the verses under discussion. So not only the lexical meaning of words, you have to grasp, you have to gain, but also, I mean, we have to also see the context of certain words under discussion. Yeah, the textual context of the verse. I mean, the verse is that in which the words emotion, for example, qalb or love, are available there. Yeah. So this kind of intratextuality, yeah, can somebody can help us. Yeah, can help us to to find out not only denotative meaning of words of mahabbah, for example, or qulub, but also their connotative ones. So it is very yeah, we do, yeah, we do not only collect Quranic verses, for example, and on qulub or mahabbah, but we have to analyze the second meaning, let's say second meaning or connotative meaning of these words. This is very important. But I think you are still doing research on this point. That is very very nice, very important, very helpful also for us. So this is my short comment. And the last one is my question. Yeah, I would like to raise a question. You talk about emotion in the Quran, or the Quranic worldview on emotion, and you take only two words, mahabbah and qulub, qalb. My question is that is emotion only related to these words, namely mahabbah and qalb, qulub, or there are some other words, some other terms that are probably relevant to to discussion or to searching for Quranic worldview on emotion. This is the these are my comments, a short comment, but I think I'm sure that your research right now is very important for us too, and for we have learned much from you about this kind of research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you so much for those comments. Yes, you're absolutely right on both of the points that you made. First of all, the textual context. Well, first of all, your question about me focusing only on two words. This was for the purposes of this talk, but of course, for sure, there are many more words that are relevant. And one of the primary emotions, or one of the primary feelings in the Quran, as you must know, is fear, of course. And fear also has to be disciplined, right? So what I was laying out is a paradigm for understanding emotion by using the example of love, okay? But actually you can apply this paradigm to the other emotions. So for instance, fear, we all know of those verses that talk about the unbelievers or people who fear other people rather than fearing God. And you know that actually the point is that you must fear God and you must fear the last day. And this is a spur to, this is, first of all, this is an enactment. I didn't really get into the point of social hierarchies in the Quran. But what you see through the verses on love and on fear is that, of course, the way that a person enacts their emotions is all according to hierarchy. So God can ask you to in the Quran to ask. God tells people to enact their fear, to fear him, and that's because, of course, God is the top of the hierarchy. So people who fear other people are not respecting the God-human hierarchy in the right way, right? So you need to fear God primarily and not fear other people, just like you need to love God primarily. But love between people is an important aspect of community. And so what you notice in the verses on love is that actually the unbelievers are the ones who are out of control of their emotions. And this relates back to the ideas that we note in history. And you're right, that I didn't take those ideas and impose them on the Quran. What happened is I was reading the Quran, and then I saw that some of these theories about emotion could apply. And so then I put them first, the theories first in the talk, but actually I didn't start from the theory, I started from the Quran. And so it is, as you note, that I'm actually trying to let the text speak. So what you'll note in the Quran is that unbelievers are characterized by their unrestraint. They bite their fingertips in rage. They're characterized by being unable to handle their emotions, whereas believers are qazimina ghayz. So they are the ones who are able to keep their rage in. They're able to have a more disciplined approach to their emotions, right? And you, in terms of rage and anger, so this is just mentioning a few of the other emotions that are important in the book. You have that whole scene with Moses and his brother Aaron, right? When Moses went away and then came back and found his people worshiping the golden calf, and he got very, very angry at Aaron, and he grabs him by the head or by the hair, and Aaron pleads with him, and he says, "Oh, son of my mother," and then you see that Moses is angry there, but his anger is a righteous anger. So it's ghadab, just like God's anger is righteous anger, right? He only gets angry at the people who deserve it. He gets angry at people for worshiping the wrong thing, okay? But then it's when Moses's anger calms that he's able to pick up the tablets and speak to his people again. So in all of these instances, you see that there are many, many emotions mentioned in the Quran. Of course, there's jealousy, there's hasad, there's anger, there's fear, there's love, there's there is sadness, of course. La tahzanun. So it wallahum yuhzanun. La khawfa alayhim wallahum yuhzanun is the believers, right? So there's no fear for them, nor shall they be sad. That's what characterizes the believers, because in fact the believers in this world have maintained a disciplined approach to all of their emotions, fearing God in the correct way, loving God in the correct way, not letting themselves get carried away by rage, but being disciplined about their rage even. Whereas the unbelievers are characterized as undisciplined, loving the wrong things, fearing the wrong people. They love it when they're in secret, they bite their fingertips in rage, right? So those are unbelievers, but the believers have this disciplined approach. So what I was saying about love was actually meant to be an overall, a kind of a model for how the Quran deals with what we would call emotion as a whole. And then the point is that it's not actually separate from what we call reason or rationality. By disciplining the self, then believers attain a truer understanding. Now, the textual context of the verses under discussion is extremely important as well. And again, it was simply that I didn't have time to get into it in this talk. But in a lot of these contexts, as you've seen, we're talking about Medinan verses that were revealed in Medina that that were recited first in Medina, and that actually are about communal formation, that has as their subject what are the morals, and what characterizes the community of believers versus the unbelievers, or versus the people of the book. And as like the believers being characterized by their modesty, by their humility, and sometimes people of the book are characterized in the same way, but sometimes they're not. And so this is what, by paying attention to this level of things, I think we can understand a lot better those kinds of discourses about what it means to be a believer. And I hope that answers some of your questions. But thank you very much for those really insightful comments. I think you enabled me to really elaborate on a few things that I meant to get into in the talk, but that there's simply not time to deal with it all. But that's exactly, those are just absolutely excellent points that we really, anybody looking at these things needs to keep in mind, that any word like hubbun or mawadda, it's not, you can't just take the words disassociated from the larger context of how they're seen in the text, and the function that those semantic function that those terms are playing in the wider discourse of belief and unbelief, and salvation and damnation, right? Because the wider context of the Quran is all about belief and salvation. So this is the overall context for all of these. And I'm happy to have further any further reflections or any other questions as well, if anybody has any.
Yeah. Any question from? Iya, pakai bahasa Indonesia. Oke. Mungkin di chat Zoom ada pertanyaan. Mas, can you check the? Nobody. Silakan. Any comments? Any comments? Oke, ada pertanyaan mungkin? Kalau tidak ada, mungkin kita di chat ada. Tolong dibuka. Oke, ada 7 ini. Ke atas, coba. Oke, no one.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me speak. It was really, really a pleasure, and a pleasure to meet you all virtually. And if anybody, yeah.
We are very glad to hear from you and your presentation on love, mind that is not considered separately from emotion, and it's also emotion cannot be separated from rationality. That's the point that I got from Dr. Karen Bauer presentation. If there is no question, we can close this discussion. So, because we have all-day discussion today, Dr. Karen Bauer.
Oh,
so
wow.
I think all
is this the end of the day, and is everybody very tired?
Yeah, I think everybody here is quite tired.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day I'll be able to be with you in Indonesia there. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So I'll say goodbye then.
Yeah, thank you, and mudah-mudahan nanti bisa ketemu ya. We can meet together, whether in Indonesia or in the next annual conference. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Dr. Karen Bauer.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Thank you.
Okay, so here as a moderator, thank you very much for the participation. Good afternoon and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.